This is Toledo Symphony Lab, a behind-the-scenes look at the world of classical music from WGTE Public Media and your Toledo Symphony. I'm Brad Cresswell. Joining me today are the Toledo Symphony's president and CEO, Zach Vassar, principal second violin and artistic administrator, Merwin Sue, and the TSO's marketing director, Felicia Canny. We have a very special guest with us today, and Zach, I'm going to defer to you and let you introduce our guest.
Very excited about our guest today. Our guest today is Pat Appold, who is a wonderful fan of orchestral music and art in Toledo, and has a special connection to one of the topics that we'll be discussing today, the wonderful guitarist we'll be performing with this weekend at the Valentine.
This concert is happening at 2 o'clock in the afternoon at the Valentine Theater. It's this Saturday, March 30th. The title of the concert is actually the title of the wonderful guitar concerto that we're going to hear, the Concierto de Aranjuez by Joaquin Rodrigo. First of all, welcome to you, Pat. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And you have a connection to this guitarist. I know you have a story you want to tell about the guitarist. Do you have an interest in the guitar in general, or is it just in this particular instance?
Well, that's a question I hadn't ever thought about. My husband bought me a guitar once. I was inspired. I was going to take lessons, but it broke before I got anywhere with it. But
you can put those strings back on.
No, it was the neck.
Oh, that's really hard.
Do we
can't
wanna,
superglue that.
Do you want to tell us how that happened? Or?
No. I don't even remember.
What exactly did Jim
lost
do?
In the annals of time. But I have always loved classical guitar. My husband, on the other hand, likes country, but the twang, the Nashville. But you can take that out.
No, we don't take anything out here.
One of the first concerts that I ever went to as a young person was classical guitar up in Michigan at my hometown. So it's kind of caught my ear ever since. And my husband and I like to now go spend some time in Florida. And we were driving around this little town where we kind of hang out, and I heard this fabulous guitar music coming. And the windows were down in the car, it's Florida. And I said, we have to drive back. So we came back down the street and sort of traced where it was coming from. And it was coming from this little bistro. And so I got him to stop the car and park. And I jumped out of the car and went and saw this man playing for entertainment in this bistro, and it was kind of surreal because he's all in black and he's very dark, and he is from Cuba, and so he has that coloring, and the lights are dim and the people are there, and I was quite enchanted. And so it was toward the end of the set, and there were people starting to depart, and he was on a porch of this bistro, so I went. Couldn't stop myself, and I had to know. So I sort of burst into this main part of the restaurant and said, "Who is that?" And they told me, and all this that I'm telling you. He was from Cuba. He was one of the finest guitarists in the world. Of course, later on, I said to myself, "What is he doing in Inglewood, Florida?" But, and that he was the friend of the owner, and therefore that's how the connection was made, that he was performing there, and he performed there every Friday night. And every Friday night we were there in Florida. We were at the bistro to hear him.
You have to wonder, did the other people who were there know what they were hearing, the quality? And
they knew he was something special.
Yeah.
Because he played a mix of, my favorite is Besame Mucho. But that type of, and Cuban things, and people would get up and dance this I suppose it's like a folk dance of Cuba. I couldn't ever quite pick it up, but you move around, and it was quite enchanting, really, the whole experience. But I think they knew. When he left there, they were quite distressed. He's relocated now, but
What is it like to hear him perform with an orchestra? I know that he appeared with the symphony a couple of years ago, right?
3 years, I think.
And do you see something similar in the audience? I unfortunately wasn't at that performance.
I was very nervous for him because, of course, I wanted him to do well. I knew he would, but I think when I looked around, we sat toward the back, you know, and I looked around at the audience, and they seemed quite rapt.
There's something so intimate about the classical guitar, and I think rapt is a perfect word for it, because it forces you more than some instruments to kind of lean in.
Absolutely. I was going to use that.
Yeah. I don't know why. Because, you know, you think about a violin, no offense, Merwin.
Or the kazoo.
No offense, Felicia. But these are flashy instruments that project themselves. But the classical guitar, by nature and by character, is a very personal sound.
It's delicate.
Yeah,
It's like a really delicate sound. And when you're plucking the strings of a violin, I mean, it's something similar, I think, but there's like a different sound that comes out of the guitar because of the body.
Yeah, and it carries with it the weight of, all the music that's come behind it, and different styles and colors of music. And even when we began, Pat, you were talking about, your husband and country guitar versus classical guitar. They're both acoustic, can be acoustic guitars, but they have all of that,
the tradition
of their tradition behind them. And the violin,
has a lot of
it has its own
too.
traditions. I mean, there's,
I would say, though, that there's something to be said about this folk tradition that the guitar naturally has. And you think about everything from the wandering minstrels to folk music and country and western, and this music is very similar, as it always tells a story. Whereas the violin can be, a dancing instrument. Think about the fiddle. But the folk element here is very alive.
The history isn't the guitar one of the earliest, or a form of the guitar, the lyre, perhaps? Or
Absolutely, yeah. It has, just so many different ways to evoke a culture, and it really is one of the instruments that really spans so many different cultures.
So the piece that we will be performing has this beautiful second movement to it, and I have a personal connection with this combination of instruments. It opens with the guitar strumming, and then the English horn comes in.
Oh yeah.
And when I first fell in love with classical guitar and oboe, I distinctly remember this was in undergrad, and I was trying to make an oboe read in Dr. Bentley's office at BGSU. I don't know if you know him, but he was there a long time ago. And he had this CD that was all oboe, all classical guitar, and I think there was also flute in there as well. And it's just a beautiful combination of instruments. It's really nostalgic sounding and just gorgeous, and just like draws you in. And as I was like whittling away at my oboe reed, it just kept like swirling in my head, and it's just really beautiful.
You're talking about the melody of the Adagio movement, which he also turned into a song later called Arnoise ma pensée, my thoughts, that has a very personal connection for him as well.
Yeah.
I want to go back and talk just briefly about the guitarist, Gerardo Perez Capdevila. You told this wonderful story, Pat, about hearing him playing in Florida. Can you fill in the gaps then? How did he end up in Toledo?
Of course, any entertainer in a bistro has CDs to sell. Yeah. And I, of course, paid far too much, but bought one and brought it back and was playing it in the car all the time when I was driving, and thought he is a concert guitarist quality. Absolutely. And so I shared with a friend in the symphony administration, and it kind of went from there. Yes, and they vetted him, and I was very pleased and honored and gratified that he met the expectations of bringing him to Toledo.
It was very interesting because that season he was playing a concerto by Manuel Ponce, and so a concerto that's maybe not one of the top 3 or 4 in terms of the guitar repertoire, so a little bit off the beaten track. And that he also, I believe he performed that same concerto with the North Carolina Symphony that year.
In Charlotte.
Was it Charlotte?
Yeah.
Okay. All those cities in the Carolinas, they really blend together.
Kind of like Canada. Yeah.
Just exactly like, there's only one city in Canada. It's very different.
That's actually what I imagine.
Of course. But it was a really, really mesmerizing performance, just because I think for so many people, it was kind of a real sense of discovery. You're discovering both the individual voice, the guitarist who's performing, as well as this great piece. And it was a really, really interesting kind of a musical adventure. So I have fond memories of that.
Well, we're going to take a quick little break here. It is fundraising time at WGTE, and even if you're listening to us as a podcast and it's weeks after the fact, anytime is a good time to donate to public radio. The phone number is 866-380-4664, or go online to WGTE.org. When we come back, we'll talk more about the guitar stylings of Gerardo Perez Capdevila, and we'll also talk about some of the other pieces that are on the program this weekend. Again, that is Saturday, March 30th, 2 o'clock in the afternoon at the Valentine Theater in downtown Toledo. And we'll also have a little guitar quiz. Lots of stuff to look forward to here on Toledo Symphony Lab. And we're back. It's Toledo Symphony Lab. I'm Brad Cresswell. And still in the studio with me, nobody has left during the break. We still have Zach Vassar, we still have Merwin Sue, we have Felicia Canny, and our special guest, Pat Appold, who is a friend of the arts and come in today and talked with us about this wonderful guitarist that you happen to hear, Pat, down in Florida, and you made the connections so that he was introduced to Toledo audiences, and that is Gerardo Perez Capdevila. He's performing one of the great guitar concertos of the 20th century, and really of all time, that Concierto de Aranjuez by Joaquin Rodrigo, and this is really one of the best-known guitar concertos out there with orchestra.
I would say it is the best known, and I think that it's amazing because Rodrigo tells this story of being invited to write this and basically having the iconic theme from the second movement basically spring into his head fully formed.
Yeah.
And to be able to conceive of a melody that just captures the imagination so vividly, just right on the spot. It's an amazing gift.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Then he went and filled in the last movement, and then he went back, and the first movement was the one that gave him the most trouble, the most trouble, the most challenging that he filled in. It should be said for people who don't know that Joaquin Rodrigo was blind from the age of 3, and so he composed with a Braille typewriter. And if you look at his manuscripts of his music, it's all in Braille. It's really interesting. Oh, wow. To see that, and just remarkable the amount of music he was able to write, given that disability of being blind. I mean, you think of some composers like Beethoven and Fauré and others who went deaf later in their lives. You know, what a handicap that would be for a composer, but also somebody who's facing the adversity of not being able to see, to write down the notes. You know, he was able to overcome that. And in fact, he credited his blindness with getting him into music. Like that was the gateway for him to become the composer and the musician that he was. Just a remarkable
I think one of the things that's fascinating is that at the time, I mean, Braille was maybe about 50 years old at that point. And in terms of kind of adaptation to music notation, it was still, it wasn't a fully formed music notation system. So I think that as the scores evolved, he was able to communicate more and more information through a Braille system. But just imagine, having to kind of dictate note by note, instrument by instrument for an orchestration like this. It's a really kind of just the mental gymnastics. It's like people who are playing 3-dimensional chess in their brains or something. There's something of that element when you imagine him kind of creating an orchestration and having to notate it in this way.
Yeah. And Rodrigo also responsible for just wonderful, beautiful music. And he wrote a few guitar concertos, and not just for one guitar. There's one out there for 4 different guitars. You know, he wrote a great harp serenade as well.
That's a beautiful piece.
Yeah, just wonderful, wonderful music. Pat, do you know this Concierto de Aranjuez? I mean, that's a pretty popular guitar piece.
Enough to know that it's really familiar because we've all heard parts of it or melodies, and yet hearing it with a symphony orchestra, this is something with all music to me, with the symphony, is that it can be a familiar piece, but you hear so much interpretation every time it's played. Yeah. And I think this Rodrigo piece is that way. You'll hear it differently every time, and it's always beautiful because and it has something to connect with what's in your knowledge, general knowledge.
Yeah, when you listen to it, you don't realize how Spanish you are until you, until you've listened to it a little bit.
I mean, it kind of there are hints of flamenco music, Andalusian music, but that central movement just, I think, speaks to everybody's experience. But there's something about it that is it's more nostalgic a theme than a sentimental theme, and it's beautiful because of its nostalgia than what could be considered.
It's certainly not over the top.
Yeah. And so there's this wistfulness about it, and you know it when you hear it. And I can't think of many other pieces that achieve it.
Yeah, it's not, again, difference between guitar and violin. It's not like a virtuosic showpiece, for the guitar. It's a piece that's built on melody. It's a piece that's built on harmony, and it really has a song-like quality to it.
And I discovered years after knowing the Rodrigo original, the Miles Davis adaptation on his album Sketches of Spain, and Gil Evans was a mastermind orchestrator, and he brought Rodrigo's music into a very different world where Miles Davis is now playing trumpet to Rodrigo's guitar, and the rest of the orchestration is slightly different, but it's also beautiful in its own way. Very different. And for my friends who are jazz fans, but not necessarily classical fans, they think that's one of the greatest compositions ever. And I take great pride in pointing out that, in my nerdiest moment possible, that it was not the original
nerdiest
adaptation.
Yeah. I don't know. That was really the nerdiest moment possible. Okay.
I have to go out and get my pocket protector and my old glasses, and
And
there are a lot of moments to choose from, right?
Interestingly enough, it's one of those times where you can play somebody the original, and despite knowing something else that they're more familiar with, they do sit down and say, wow, this is really beautiful. I had no idea.
Well, and it's also been heard, in the media and television and movies and things like that. And I think you alluded to that a little bit, Pat, that people have heard it before. It'll certainly be familiar to them.
And they'll want to hear it again. I feel that about the piece. I'm always happy when I hear it because, there it is.
Yeah.
Well, I think that the kind of the story of the genesis of it really kind of, ties into that, because this has always been a kind of a favorite time period of music for me, kind of the time after the end of the First World War, when the Second World War starts to become not just imminent but inevitable. And Rodrigo is sitting with friends drinking wine, and they are fully aware that this might be one of the last peaceful evenings that they're sharing. And it's, Rodrigo at up until just a few, maybe a dozen months before, a few months is, maybe I was wrong with that, but he was in Paris, and so he was escaping to Spain, but I don't think anybody who was informed throughout Europe really felt that there was really that many areas of sanctuary.
Yeah.
And so there's this sense that, this is coming from this moment that is something that they're going to want to return to because they know that they're few and far between. And the wistfulness, I think, is, as much a part of that kind of that origin story of the piece.
Yeah. This was 1938?
I think the meeting that they had was in 1939, and he started writing it then. I think it actually came out in 1940, if I'm not mistaken.
Because he was back in Paris when he wrote the piece. Yeah. But I love how in his description of the, it was sort of set up like a challenge, or he was challenged to write this piece.
Yeah.
And by his own admission, he downed 2 glasses of red wine and said, "Okay, let's do it." And that was the beginning of the piece. Out of curiosity, how does it work now? Like, I know how it works with soloists and orchestra. The guitar you don't think of as necessarily an instrument that can carry over the orchestra. When you do that, how do you handle the difference between the two?
It is a very delicately orchestrated concerto, but it was something that Rodrigo himself was very concerned about. And it's kind of funny. He wasn't actually worried about it until the train ride to the premiere. And then the guitar soloist
said,
"Wait
a minute.
I can't sleep. I'm worried I'm going to be drowned out by the orchestra." And Rodrigo's like, "Oh, what if you're drowned out by the orchestra?" But it is very delicately orchestrated, and I think that sometimes it is a little bit of a concern, but I think that you're sensitive to the challenge. It's definitely a little bit of a different quality than accompanying another instrument.
Well, and I imagine also that's where the conductor comes in. I want to take another quick little fundraising break for WGTE, and we're going to come back and talk about, mention the conductor and also the other music that's on the program by Mozart. We don't want to forget that. And we'll have our guitar quiz still ahead. That's coming up here on Toledo Symphony Lab. Again, you can support public radio right now, whether you are listening to us on the radio or via a podcast. Just give us a call at 866-380-4664. Go online to WGTE.org, or you can use the WGTE app, available for Android and for Apple. And as always, thank you for your support. Okay, and we're back again with Toledo Symphony Lab. I'm Brad Cresswell. Joining me in the studio, Zach Vassar, Merwin Sue, Felicia Canny, our special guest, Pat Appold. A little music there in the background. We've been talking about a guitar concert that's happening with the Symphony this Saturday at 2 o'clock p.m. at the Valentine Theater. I know this is nowhere near the quality of the Rodrigo concerto we've been talking about.
It does evoke The Office just a little.
It feels like The Office, yes.
But this is our quiz music, because we can't have an episode without a quiz. That's a rule. That's what we do here at Toledo Symphony Lab. So I've got a very simple, short little guitar quiz.
Which unfortunately means I still won't get any right.
And I'm going to put it out there. This is multiple choice, okay? And so when you think you know the answer, you just go ahead and say it, all right? Question number 1. Classical guitar belongs to a family of instruments known as what? Is it chordophones, aerophones, or philharmonophones? Any guesses?
I would say chordophones.
Chordophones is my guess.
Yeah.
Chordophones it is. Okay. The word guitar comes from the word, I'll give you 3 choices. Is it chitarrone, or is it cithara, or is it guitarra?
I'm going to go A.
Chitarrone? No.
C.
No.
C.
My guess is B, Brad.
Wait. Did you say sitar?
Yeah.
Good job,
It's like
Zach.
the old zither, right?
Cithara, yeah. It's an old Latin stringed instrument, right? Chitarrone is just the Spanish for theorbo, and guitarra is a German way of saying guitar.
I thought you were trying to fool us.
I was, and I succeeded.
and I win.
I won first.
Yeah.
Actually, I won that point, guys.
Yeah. Zach won that one. Everybody won the first one. So far, Zach is ahead. Number 3. Many composers composed at the piano, but some often composed at the guitar. Out of the 3 composers I'm going to give you, 2 of them composed with the guitar, okay? And you tell me which 2. Was it Berlioz, Vivaldi or Schubert? Those are your three. So pick two of them.
I'd say Berlioz and Vivaldi. I'd say Schubert and Vivaldi. I'd say Berlioz and Schubert.
Everyone but Vivaldi.
So
Vivaldi wrote the best guitar concertos, though. How did he not compose with one?
He didn't compose with the guitar, as far as I know.
Of course, he composed on the violin.
Yeah. Well, he may have composed on the guitar. I don't know.
I was
didn't
right.
Look it up.
I was right.
No,
I could have been right.
Berlioz was a guitarist, you know.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was. I mean, he was not really a very good guitarist. He was not a very good instrumentalist at anything. But the guitar was like his strongest instrument.
The closest he could be to adequate.
Yeah, and Schubert couldn't afford a piano, so he had a guitar.
Wait,
well, that's the saddest
what?
story I've ever heard.
Yeah,
Schubert wrote the most beautiful piano music, though.
Yeah, he did. He did, but he didn't need he used the guitar just to pick out notes. So he could test, different notes and things like that.
I am baffled.
He used to keep a guitar strung, like on the end of his bed. He used to hang it on the end of his bed. So if he had any ideas, he'd wake up in the middle of the night, get up and pluck it out on the guitar.
It's easier than getting up and going to the piano.
It
anyway.
is.
Yeah, or the bathroom.
Yes.
Well, he could
Thanks,
have had
Brad.
a guitar in the bathroom. You never know.
Well, he was really high-strung.
Yeah. Okay. Not even going to acknowledge that one. All right, next question. When is National Guitar Day? Is it February 11th, April 11th, or August 11th? Go for it, Zach. Let's do process of elimination.
We're going to go for April 11th.
Anybody else want to try?
I'll take February.
That's right around your birthday.
February 11th
Yes, exactly.
is National Guitar Day. When is International Guitar Month? Is it February, April, or August?
I'm going to stick to April.
Oh, sorry. No, you're right.
Oh, hey! How about that?
You're right. It seems like I've done that before with you, Zach.
You have.
Where you got the right answer and I gave you the bad
I
buzzer.
still think I have a much better track record on this program
Yeah.
than you give me credit for.
Totally. Okay, here's the last question. Who holds the longest... who holds the Guinness World Record for the longest amount of time playing the guitar without stopping? Marathon guitar session.
Oh, goodness.
Okay, here are your three choices.
That would hurt, I
Was
think.
it David Brown, who played the guitar for 114 hours at a pub in Ireland? Is it Roger David, who played the guitar for 320 hours at a bandshell in Brooklyn? Or was it Brian Rogers, who played the guitar for 65 hours in front of Big Ben in London? A, B, or C?
Just because it's a Guinness record, I feel like the pub in Ireland seems entirely appropriate.
They were all
That's
traditional
right.
I'm
songs.
sure. Getting more traditional by the moment.
Right.
They're
To the
like-
end where it's just like bing, 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 bing.
I know.
bing.
That counts, yes.
But I mean, I feel so sorry for the Guinness guys. I mean, do they have to stay sober to make sure that they get a proper measurement there? You
It's
know what I mean?
Guinness. I don't think so. And if they're in Ireland, I'm fairly certain they don't.
Yeah.
Well, I actually have a wonderful student who also takes classical guitar, whose last name was Brown. So I felt that I felt like I was being guided in a
Yeah,
particular
David Brown.
direction.
That's like 5 days.
Yeah.
That
I
he
just did the
played
math. That's
nonstop.
impossible.
Don't
At
they?
a-
They
well,
have
I mean-
to get bathroom breaks or something, don't
No,
they?
Yeah.
I think we
set up beforehand.
predetermined that it's easier to get a guitar than to go to the bathroom.
That's where the guitar in the bathroom comes in.
Wow, I can't believe we went back to that. Nicely
Yeah.
done, Sue.
Good job. Okay, enough of that music.
I was kind of getting to like it.
Well, you can have more. You can indulge in the bath of Rodrigo. That doesn't sound
Wow.
right. You can. Well, you can hear more guitar at the concert this weekend that we've been talking about. We're actually just about out of time, but I do want to mention the other pieces on the program and the conductor, the guest conductor. Has he been here before?
He has not been here before. He's quite familiar with Alain, and Alain is quite familiar with him. He does some wonderful work in Montreal, and we're very much looking forward to having him come and lead Mozart and Rodrigo. And the Mozart works are, two, almost pillars of his compositional output. One from really the very beginning of his career when he was, 17 or something. And then the Eine kleine Nachtmusik much more towards the end of his career.
Yeah. The beginning of Mozart's career, though, was like when he was 8.
Right. I would go out on a limb and say this was his first great symphony.
Absolutely.
If you've ever watched the movie Amadeus, it basically opens the movie.
Right.
The syncopated.
Exactly. Yeah.
opening.
And it's exactly.
Yeah.
And it's I think it's right as Neville Mariner's name comes up on screen. It's perfectly choreographed. But I loved that moment in that movie, and it made me love this symphony. And the rest of the symphony beyond those opening chords is still really amazing.
Yeah.
But I'd just like to go on record and say that Eine kleine Nachtmusik was on the very first program of what is known as the Toledo Symphony 75 years ago. So we're waving the flag of history here in this performance by bringing that back.
A little night music. Yeah,
A little night history.
Well, it should be said that, this program has got 3 really, really popular, fantastic works. I mean, there's not a moment wasted in this program. So, if you're looking for a night of familiarity in the context of hearing it live with the symphony.
You should go in the afternoon.
It's the afternoon.
Yeah, it's the afternoon. If you're looking for it, you want to try that again there, pal?
No, I don't want to try it again.
2 o'clock is
Just
afternoon.
2 o'clock. I mean,
maybe in
it's-
public radio land, that's getting up there.
Listen, when I used to live in New York and we would sing at the Opera Bar all night, we would talk about getting up at 2 o'clock in the evening. Okay, so anyway,
That's funny.
yeah.
You're going to leave that in?
Did you set a Guinness
No.
World Record?
Red wine record, maybe. Maybe a Montepulciano record instead of a Guinness record. No, but if you want to have an afternoon of really wonderful, enjoyable, well-known pieces of music in a live context, I always say this, and it can't be stressed enough, that hearing music live in an auditorium is head and shoulders above any other listening experience you can possibly imagine. And to have this kind of popular, really well-known music performed, it's a great opportunity. And don't forget, it's just happening one time, this Saturday, 2 o'clock in the afternoon at the Valentine Theater. More information, we should mention, you can call up the symphony at 419...
Even numbers. You're almost there.
419 something, something, something...
2468.
2468. You can find out more information by calling up the box office at 419-248.
Oh.
It's
I have it written right in front of me.
Just write in order.
6, 8.
I can't read
My daughter
own.
has kindergarten screening later today.
You think I should join her?
You guys can just sit next to each other.
Just see if I can.
She'll whap you upside the
Okay.
head.
Cute.
Yeah.
Let's try it again. As we know, I have like a mental block with this phone number.
You do?
I don't know why. And I think it's because I've been giving out the pledge phone numbers today. But the number to call for the box office at Toledo Symphony, 419-246-8000. Or you can also, thank you, or you can also go online to ToledoSymphony.com, right? Okay. This program is a production of WGTE Public Media in collaboration with our sponsor, the Toledo Symphony. You can download episodes of our program as a podcast by going to our website at wgte.org/lab, and you can also subscribe to us through your podcast app of choice, including Apple and Google Podcasts. My thanks to Zach Vassar, Merwin Sue, and Felicia Canny. Also a big thanks to our special guest, Pat Appold, for joining us today. I'm Brad Cresswell. You've been listening to Toledo Symphony Lab from FM 91.